Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Extra Shift. I am Chris, here as always with Brendan. How are we doing?
Good. Good evening, everyone. I can see a few people watching already. Nice to see you all. It is episode 208, and we have a Stanley Cup final matchup. I was a little surprised, honestly. I was really kind of expecting to, be recording maybe Wednesday night, but yeah, it happened, and we'll talk about that soon. But it's been an interesting playoffs this season, just in kind of in general for me. Like I really feel like we've kind of done away with most of the real kind of they're there every year teams for the last few years, and it's been kind of an exciting time to have new teams break in as actual like real contenders in the NHL.
Yeah, it's been an interesting conference final period, because I think that, well, first of all, I'm apologizing deeply to the Rangers and the Stars, because of course Kiss of Death Buchanan over here managed to put both of them out in one fell swoop, which is really hard to do. But
it's good work.
I do some of my best work in eliminating teams in the conference final, you know this, but it was a very intriguing conference final. We'll get into that in a little bit more depth shortly, but I just thought that just a brief statement on that is I think that the games themselves were pretty good. Some of them were a lot better than others. And then one series in particular was deeply weird. And we are going to talk about that one. It was the one that finished today, and that series, from the moment that Dallas went 2-0 up, and looked like they were going to run away with the game to take a lead in the series, they played absolutely abysmally. They got 2-0 up, and then that was it. We're going to come back to that, because that series, I literally have screenshots from Twitter of everybody I know, not just like big name, everyone I know going, yeah, the Stars going to rampage over the top of this. And from that moment on, it was all over. So, but yeah, it's 208, obviously. Now, we're going to go with our trivia. I'm back on our trivia.
All right, here we go.
Trivia, actually, it works with today. So Corey Perry today plays his 209th playoff game. So moving off 208, this moves him into sole possession of 13th in postseason games. One clear of the two other players he was tied on, who will sit on 208 playoff games. Who are the other two players?
Oh boy. It's got to be. Are they active? Oh, is this active players?
They're not active.
Not active players. Okay, so they're the players that all right, no longer playing.
Of the players that are on this list, Corey Perry is the highest active player.
Oh, interesting. All right, that's
I guess there is nobody on this list. Yeah, there's nobody on this list. Joe Pavelski, who may well be done after today, is next on the list.
Right. Oh, okay. Oh gosh. All right. I think that makes it trickier, because now I'm going to think about who was in the playoffs for like a significant period of time. It's probably going to be some superstars from dynasty teams. It's probably going to be like a Wayne Gretzky in there, or a Mark Messier, or someone like who spent a bunch of time on playoff teams.
I'll already give you one. You've got one of the two.
Okay.
Gretzky's one. Gretzky's one.
Gosh. I feel like it's going to be maybe someone from like one of those like Islanders teams or something.
They didn't play for the Islanders, although they did play for a lot of other people.
Okay. It's not Yager, is it?
Yeah, it is. Of course, it's
Yager. Yeah. I was going to say, like at this point, I'm like, all right, well, once we've gone past that, I don't think any of the Penguins are in there. But
look, I knew when I'm giving you that one, I knew it was an absolutely painful one. So I figured I need to give you two fairly easy players.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, it's tricky. I mean, like, otherwise I'm just going to have to start naming Hall of Famers and hoping for the best.
Absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating to know that list. Just quickly before we move into the episode. So the most games played in the playoffs. Do you know who the answer is?
Oh, so I mean, if Gretzky's down at like 12th or 14th or 14th or something, did it say?
Yeah, 14th.
Oh god, it's got to be like Maurice Richard or someone when there was like fucking 4 teams in the league or
Nope.
something.
Nope. It's actually far later than that, and they only played for 3 teams.
Oh wow. Well, they must have been in the playoffs every single year.
Yeah, which probably narrows down. The top 2 both played for the same team.
Okay.
Who were in the playoffs every damn year. That should be a really obvious, because one team brags about their playoff streak more than any other.
Yeah.
Tim is currently screaming in the comments. He's not actually saying anything, but Tim is screaming.
Oh man,
so, second on the list is Nick Lidstrom.
Who
played 263 games in the playoffs.
Yeah, of course. All right, that makes sense. It's not like is it like Stevie Y, or is it like someone is like Zetterberg or
Stevie Y is way down the list actually.
Wow,
He's
okay.
behind Pavelski. The answer is Chris Chelios.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Montreal, Chicago,
and then there's a bunch of guys that could be like, this guy.
To be fair, Chelios did it in 24 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a good point. Like, there's going to be some guys that didn't have that kind of longevity. That there's just no chance.
To give you the idea of what we're talking about as well, Perry 16 seasons played for 209, and obviously there's more coming. Gretzky 16 seasons for 208, Yager 18 seasons for 208. The 2 that shocked me, Mike Keane, 220 played, and it only took him 15 seasons to get there. Montreal, Colorado, Dallas, and Vancouver. And Glenn Anderson with 225 played in 15 seasons.
So in terms of the active players, who's still in there? Like, I imagine that Crosby and Malkin are somewhat close to the
okay,
top.
the active player list, the top 5 active players are Corey Perry is number 1 on 209 asterisk. Joe Pavelski 201.
Yeah.
Ryan McDonough 191.
Yeah. Sid
180.
Yeah.
Malkin 177.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the top 5. And that is all of, if you go on the list of on the NHL records, if you're looking down the page, that is the entirety of the first page. The first page has 50 names on it. Out of 50 players in that top list, only 5 are active, probably 4 after the end of this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be difficult for a lot of teams that are in this era of the NHL where literally half the teams don't make it, versus an eras of the NHL
everyone was in.
The top 80% of the league was in, or something like you had to be like the worst 4 teams to not make it or something.
One expansion team misses out. That's about it. Those Sharks getting battered. The Capital, the Caps being absolutely destroyed year after year after year early on. All that stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move into before we do that as well, we've got also the jersey numbers. We haven't done our jersey numbers. Number 8.
Yeah.
I mean, and again,
obviously there's a lot of famous 8s, and especially defensemen. You've got your Brent Burns, you've got your Drew Dowdys, and so forth.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, there's I don't know. There's some Russian dude, pretty good. Although again, for me personally, and again, appropriate. And he's already come up. This is the second time he's come up on the podcast. He's going to come up again later. Joe Pavelski. Number 8 in San Jose, and Captain America himself. It's a sad day for Joe Pavelski.
I'm just doing a quick scan to see if there's anyone who wears number 8 that's still in the playoffs, and I don't think so.
Nope.
Kyle Okposo technically. He's technically on the Panthers with 8. I can't remember if he's actually been playing or not.
It's he's
have to look that up.
He's got a little bit of time, not much. He's got a little bit of time, but I
think that's it. I think that might be it.
Yeah, like again, in terms of number 8, obviously it depends on who you are, but like it's either Mark Recchi, or it's Ovechkin, or for me as a Sharks fan, it's obvious. It's fairly obviously Joe Pavelski. You know, and you know, I can hear Vancouver fans yelling out Tanev. You know, Zach Werenski, if there was a Columbus Blue Jackets fan out there, I'm sure they'd be yelling at me right now, but I don't know if they exist. So we'll just
it looks like Okposo has been playing. He's been playing 6 to 8 minutes a night. So look,
that's more than the entire roster of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, Toronto fans. You're an easy target. Right. Anyway, Czechia are your IHF World Champions. 2-0 over Switzerland in the final we all predicted.
Yeah, of course. Everyone thought that would happen. Yeah, definitely.
I absolutely loved also Sweden win the bronze 4-2 over Canada. And I loved that everyone in Canada was like, okay, well, you know, all these teams are out now, but at least we've got Canada in the world champ. Oh, that's right. That's our net. Oh, our goaltending. Ooh.
I mean, look, I think the World Championship is always like such a mixed bag of like who gets eliminated at the right time and still wants to play and goes over, and it can make like a big difference. But goalie is always such like a questionable position for a lot of these teams. Like you'll have a lot of teams where it's like their starting goalie is like a backup from some random team or something, and like that's the best that they could get. You know,
or even worse,
show or something for
or even worse if your team Canada is Jordan Binnington.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a bit like that. I wonder, has anyone heard from that guy who turns up every 3 months and makes a post about Sweden being not very good?
I was about to bring him up. So for people who there are people who
I don't understand what that guy's whole deal is.
There are people who listen who aren't in the NHL fans page, but for those people who aren't, just explain the post, because it's in every championship.
If you look at it, like I don't know if everyone else can do this, but like as an admin of the group, I can see like the specific. I can look at like the group profile for someone, and I can see just the posts that they make in the group, and it's literally just like. And there's less there now because he goes back and deletes them, but it'll be like 3 posts, and all they are just like a post every few months about being like, this is what Sweden's like international best roster would be or whatever for the Olympics or whatever, is basically making the implication of like, oh, it's actually not that good, that maybe they shouldn't be in the top division, all this kind of stuff, and like they wouldn't compete with all these other teams. I don't get it. I don't know if it's this weird like vendetta against Sweden, if he's like from Finland or something and just fucking hates the Swedes, or I actually am really getting suspicious at this point that it's like a weird degradation kink thing that he just like gets off on people telling him that he's wrong.
Look, it feels like people can, and we're going to talk about it later on. People can get on me for like maintaining, even though they've made the Stanley Cup final, that the Oilers are an elite team. I've got some rationale behind that, and like this takes it to a whole other level, because he is just persistently telling you how poor Sweden is. And
he's gotten less insistent about it. I just really think that it's just this weird thing of like he just wants people to reply to this post and tell him that it's just weird bait at this point.
Also, on the Canada, by the way, because I made fun of him before, do you know what, in 8 games played, do you know what Binnington's save percentage was?
Oh, gosh. I mean, look, I didn't watch it that closely, but I can't imagine it was very good.
885.
Oof.
Like and to give you an idea, he got in the last 2 games, he had a 935 and a 906, which gives you an idea of where he was coming from. His first game was a 950. His second game was a 714.
Oof. Yeah, look, I know that he had at least one major stinker, and it's not the kind of competition where you can do that. Like that's the thing with like single elimination kind of competitions, especially once you get out of pools. It's you can't afford to have a goalie that just fucking shits the bed one game.
He allowed 23 goals on 200 shots. Oh, it was not pretty. It was not pretty. But I mean, look what was pretty. Like Czechia, and we've been talking about this for a while, and we've been talking about the fact that Czechia is fairly consistently getting better. Every time we mention the World Championships, we're like, look out for Czechia. And like again, like they managed to, Sweden managing to get the bronze,
Yeah, it's been really nice to see like some teams that were previously like real kind of, bottom of that for top division kind of really become actual competitors, not just in this kind of international competition, but in juniors and so forth. Like there's been a bit of a changing of the guard. It's no longer just Canada at the top and everyone else hoping to get into the final with them. That's for sure. Actually, I did see the end of that one game that it was a little weird time for us, but where Canada like blew like a 4-0 lead or something like that,
Yeah.
and then had to like take it to overtime and still and squeeze out a win.
It was like I was looking at it as well because like the US were nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
The only thing I was really paying attention to in the US, and we haven't got it in the notes, so I'll mention it now, was of course Big Willie Styles himself, Will Smith, who managed to get himself on that roster. He was fine. He played really well. He had a decent campaign over there. Was looked decent. Gives him some experience. Was happy with that. But overall, like the US not placing, I mean, they didn't really send. The US, to be fair to the US usually send more of a development squad.
Yeah.
Whereas you get, Canada tries to win this thing. Whereas US just goes, we're going to send our US development team and put like Cole Caulfield in there, or we'll put
a couple
guys
in there or whatever.
We'll throw a couple of guys who you've heard of, but everyone else is like, someone in development who is either coming into the league in the next year or is going back to college. So that's fine. Moving on to the other big tournament before we get into NHL stuff. We have our first PWHL champions. Yeah, Minnesota defeats Boston to win the Walter Cup. The second time ever asking. So they beat them 3-0 in Game 5, best of 5 series in the Walter Cup playoffs. The whole thing. I did watch these playoffs, and it was absolutely fascinating to watch. So, couple of big things happened. So, if you remember from when we were talking about it earlier in the year, the change they made for the Walter Cup is that the team that finished first got to call their shot.
Yeah.
And pick their opponent. Toronto won the regular season and were absolutely brilliant in winning the regular season. Sarah Nurse was outstanding all season for them. Then you had Montreal and Boston were the other two teams that were in there. MPP being just a superhero in Montreal. You got to call your shot. Toronto called their shot, and Toronto went for the bottom seed, Minnesota, but made it absolutely plain that it actually wasn't a case of, well, they're the worst team, so we're just going to pick them, because it was about during the season records, and they had a better record during the season than Minnesota. And in terms of travel time, they were like, it's a harder travel schedule for Minnesota, extra jet miles. Yep, we'll do that. Minnesota reverse swept Toronto after Toronto went 2-0 up. Look, Sarah Nurse also suffered a major concussion in the end of that series and was out. So that probably cost Toronto. But Toronto lose to Minnesota. Boston beat Montreal. That series was incredible because every single game went to overtime. And I think it was a triple overtime winner in Game 5. I'm pretty sure. It was just an insane series. That was going back and forth the whole time. We get to the final. Minnesota beat Boston in Game 4 to win the Cup. They thought. And then there was a review which found that it wasn't a legitimate goal. And by the way, when I say they were celebrating, like the equipment was off. Everyone was on the ice. It was almost streamers falling. Now, we've joked around about this in the NHL because there's always that joke going around about, the Buffalo one where it's like the Dallas Buffalo.
You'll get called back, yeah.
We're not bringing it back now. No, they brought it back. And they finished the game. And Boston won in overtime. And that prompted everyone to get really worried that, well, what if Boston goes on and wins Game 5 now? Minnesota's going to look stupid. So Minnesota made sure that it didn't get close. They played a really good game in Game 5. Kendall Coyne-Schofield was absolutely superb. Real captain's performance. Gets the empty net goal to seal
Yeah,
the
it's,
deal.
it's a nice story, given how instrumental she was in the creation of the PWHL and all that kind of stuff. Like it was a really nice kind of moment to be the first champion.
Yeah, obviously there's a slight tinge of sadness because she was briefly on the San Jose coaching staff as well, but
Yeah.
she's obviously not there now. But one of the things that is a hallmark, if you've ever seen Kendall Coyne Schofield, one of her hallmarks is she's one of the fastest players on ice. If you remember a couple of years ago, for anyone who's vaguely heard the name, the NHL brought her into All-Star Weekend to race Connor McDavid. And she very nearly got him. Like, it was really tight. She's very, very fast. So, but yeah, a great season. Absolutely brilliant season overall. I recommend going back and watching the games. They're all on YouTube. The PWHL, all the PWHL stuff is on YouTube. You can go back and watch full games. The coverage was outstandingly good. I think they've got a really strong base to build from there. So, I recommend in the off season, while you've got no hockey to watch, go and catch up if you haven't, and go and watch the last season of the PWHL. And I guarantee you'll find yourself over the next 12 months watching more of it because it's really good hockey. It's incredibly good hockey.
Yeah.
And you've got some of the best players in the world finally playing in a league that is trying to be a proper professional league. And I mean, watch it if only to watch MPP play in Montreal and watch that crowd carry her like a god.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some players that getting towards the end of their career, and it'll be just watch them while you can.
Yeah, if you get a chance to watch Marie-Philippe Poulin play, do it. Seriously, just do it. All right, let's go on to some of the front office changes now. So we literally only have one team at the moment without a head coach. That is the Sharks, because we're taking our time. Let's run with that. Apparently, Jeff Blashill's been interviewed a second time now. It looks like it's either Sturm, Blashill, or possibly Ryan Wasowski. It's one of those three, probably. I'm thinking more Blashill, which we'll talk about that if it happens. But the Seattle Kraken have named Dan Bylsma as the new head coach, which isn't really that much of a surprise. He'd actually done something that was unusual in terms of deciding to go back to the A.
He'd been with, I think, the AHL for a little while, as their their feeder club and so forth. And
but he'd even gone back and been an assistant. He'd even gone back and been an assistant in the A before he went back to head coaching in the A, because he was just like, I want to just get my feet back under me again.
Yeah, he took a real kind of step back, reevaluate. I'm curious to see how much he's changed. We haven't really kind of seen much of him since he was the Penguins head coach in 2009 and for a few years, and just kind of eventually he got a bit stale, and it sounds like he's kind of reinvented himself a little bit as a coach, and I'm very curious to see how that translates to the NHL.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see what he does there. Seattle is a really fascinating. I don't think the work necessarily that is going to be most important in Seattle is happening in the coaching. I think it's what they do in free agency coming up. Seattle, I expect that Seattle's going to take a swing. Seattle and Utah are the two most likely clubs to just swing for the fences in free agency. And I think that most of the big deals that we're talking about will run through those two clubs. One, they've got the cap space, but two, they've watched the Golden Knights win a cup. And they're looking at this and going, all right, Seattle took a step back last year and is like, we want to make a bigger step forward. They've got the cap space. I think they're going to want to go out and get somebody who's ready now to lead a team into that sort of contention again. There's a couple of places where I think that a Stamkos could look at if he looks to go elsewhere. Seattle and Utah are my two picks for that, because I just feel like that fits what they're doing there. But the other interesting part is that Dan Bylsma talked about it. Jessica Campbell, who's been his assistant and run the power play in the AHL, looks like she's been appointed as the assistant coach, and she'll be probably running the power play in the NHL, which means it is our first actual bench appointment permanent. Well, we've had video coaches, but
yeah. I mean, it's obviously one thing to be behind the scenes, another thing to be visibly on the bench, during NHL games or something. I think that's a big step in the right direction. It's a start.
Yeah, look, it's not everything yet, obviously, but it's definitely something. And it's definitely something that is important, and I think it's a really good move. And look, I think it will work out. I think we've got a couple. There's a couple of former players in particular who are well regarded, who are working in clubs, and I think that we're going to see probably some of them start to get a bit more of a conversation. There's been a lot of conversations around who was going to be the first team to do it. In hindsight, Seattle makes perfect sense. Like they present themselves as a forward-thinking organization, Climate Pledge Arena and everything around what they've done there. It's not just a branding on Climate Pledge Arena. They made a bunch of actual commitments on targets, on renewable targets, and all those sorts of things. The arena powers itself. It's all everything in that damn arena is recycled. They take a more forward-thinking approach to everything, and I'm not surprised that they're the ones that have sort of made this move first, and we'll see where that goes from there. But looking positive. The other interesting one is, after naming everybody who's been a general manager in the last 15 years, the Columbus Blue Jackets finally settled on Don Waddell. And
not long after he left Carolina either, just a few days later.
Yeah, we talked about Eric Tulsky in the last episode finally getting the big chair in Carolina, but Don Waddell is now president of hockey operations and general manager. Did you see the photo from his first day?
No.
They put up a photo on social media of his first day, going hard at work already, and it's literally Don Waddell sitting in an empty office on an old phone. And I'm like, that is the most Don Waddell photo I could ever think of.
Yeah.
Like, it's walnut cabinets behind him. There's like a big window there, but he's on an old desk phone, like computer in front of him. So at least there's something modern. But it's the most Don Waddell I could have thought of.
Yeah, that's it. It's settled in. He knows what he's got to do.
Yeah, it was just perfect. It was absolutely perfect. What do you reckon about Waddell being brought in Columbus?
I just don't know what to make of Columbus really at this point in time. They
straighten that out.
Yeah, I think they have some aspirations. Clearly they thought that they had a chance to really come. They signed Gaudreau. They did all of these things. They've been aggressive with their moves, but they're still a kind of middling to poor team. Obviously they another one of those teams with a significant amount of money to spend coming into the next season. I don't know that they're much of a destination, but maybe this helps. Maybe this is a stabilizing force that'll make them a little bit more of taken seriously as a team, as some of the Metro teams slide back. They're in a position that if they have a few young players that take a big step forward, they could, become a decent team in this division, but they're still a long way off.
They're a thoroughly confusing team, because every year they go out and they seem to go, we're making the move that's going to be and again, obviously the obvious one is, going out and getting Johnny Gaudreau and going, well, we've got Gaudreau in the building now. This is the push for Columbus. And it's not even like it false starts. It just never goes. It's not, you don't get a stutter start and then it goes back. Like Buffalo have given us false starts where they'll start to look good and then it just falls off a cliff. Columbus don't even give us that.
No, I mean, I think Columbus have just got that real kind of handicap that they've just never been a really competitive team. They've been a respectable team at times of being like, this is a team that can get into the playoffs and cause some trouble. But that's kind of really all they've been. They've just kind of been the pesky team. At no point in time have they been like, this is a star-studded great team or anything during their entire tenure in the NHL.
Yeah, it's a team that doesn't quite ever know what its actual identity is in any way, shape, or form. Doesn't know what sort of hockey it wants to play. Doesn't know what sort of players it wants to recruit.
Well, it knows it wants to have Boone Jenner and a bunch of guys throwing hits and being guys in the room and stuff. And
yeah, it's just it just feels so weird as an organization. And like obviously under Yamo as well, they were making weird draft picks. Like a couple of times they went off the board a little bit to go and get their player, and it didn't work out. It's just
they could really use a lot of like real talent. Like they could go for some some like, if they make a handful of picks of players that have real upside, like real star upside or whatever, they could turn around quickly. Like they've got. I think the thing is like they've got all of that solid depth. They've got all of those like bottom six guys who are not a liability and go and do this and that and whatever. And if they get some good goaltending out of their guys or whatever, then they're a hard team to score on. But they just don't really have the punch. I think that they were hoping to get that out of Gaudreau, but they need more. Like obviously Line A being in and out of the roster and in player assistance and stuff doesn't help and so forth. But they just need like a few more real kind of exciting players to watch because they just don't have anyone.
And that was I was looking at when I did the other day. I did, and thank you to the handful of people who took a look at it. I did the Mana trade stuff the other day, and I was looking at a bunch of teams, and I went, "Oh, I'll have a look at Columbus and see what I could do with Columbus," and not much. Like you look at it and you go, there's some names there, but none of them are particularly anything that you would write home about. Like, for example, they were the team. You forget they were the team that went out and got Ivan Provorov.
Yeah, that's right. They signed Provorov. They signed. They got Severson. They got.
So you go down their defense. Like their defense, for example, was Werenski, Severson, Provorov, Goodbranson, Boquist, Jake Bean.
Yeah,
but they were absolutely terrible as a defense. Absolutely abysmal as a defense. And that defense on paper shouldn't be bad. Like, it's not going to be world beating, but it shouldn't be bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's some names. There's some names on there. Columbus has always frustrated me as a team that has continued to just put roadblocks in front of the young players. They'll end up with like drafting these guys that are like, Jake Bean or this guy, and they just they end up being like the guy in the press box, or they end up being the sixth defenseman or whatever every single night. It's like, when are you going to give these guys a chance to be an exciting team?
The unusual thing I will say about them last year is they did play Fantilli. And he played 49 games. He had 27 points in 49 games.
Yeah.
Minus 21. I know my plus minus doesn't matter, but ouch. And that's not his fault. 100% that's not his fault.
Yeah, not a great season for Elvis either.
No, like that's like 12 goals and 15 assists in a first season. That's decent. You want sort of, that's a promising sort of return that you get. So that was decent. But you look at the rest of the contracts, and like as we said, Boone Jenner, like they're desperate to keep Boone Jenner on board. Johnny
untouchable Boone Jenner.
Johnny Gaudreau, who is signed until the end of time now. The rest of that roster, like they've got a lot of turnover this year, so they'll have a lot of cap. They've got a lot of RFAs. They've got some cap. I just don't know who's going to look at Columbus and go, that's where I want to be. Probably somebody who'd like a big contract but can't get one.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah,
that feels more like the answer. And obviously, Elvis Merzlikins is now sort of secured the goalie position there, and that's sort of decent. But remember, they also had, and obviously lost one goalie through tragedy, obviously, but for a while there they had what was considered to be this production line of young Eastern European goalies coming through, and that all just tapered out. It wasn't just obviously what happened. It was they were tapering out before that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Tarasov is still a big potential for them, but
but again, he's another big potential among big potentials that have existed in that space for a very long time. Yeah. So it's just confusing. Also, before we move on, I do just want to make mention here as well in front office changes and that. The most important thing, and I mentioned him previously, but I want to mention him again, Big Willie style, ladies and gentlemen, Will Smith is coming out of Boston and is going to your San Jose Sharks. So Will Smith will be probably second line center for the San Jose Sharks next year in a move that is not at all promoting him above his station. So, look, I said to you, and I've said on this podcast a number of times since obviously the first overall pick thing, either Smith, either they were both going to go back to college or they're both going to play.
Yeah.
So I now anticipate that they're both playing.
Probably, yeah.
I don't see the point of having Smith there and just not bringing everyone in and going, let's just do this.
Yeah, see what we got. Look, and they don't have to necessarily commit to it for the entire year. If it's not working out, they've got options. And
look, it'll sell tickets. And Hasso Partner is all about the selling of the tickets. All about the selling of the tickets. Forget everything else. Jakob Slaven wins the Lady Bing in
pretty runaway kind of thing. That's kind of his whole deal, not taking penalties and defending, which I think is more impressive as a defenseman. Really, the amount of physicality he has to have and not take penalties and so forth is pretty good.
Well, if you look at the rest of that list, it's Elias Pettersson, Austin Matthews, Braden Point, Kyle Connor.
Yeah, it's all centers, and
it's not you get Kyle McCarr, which is laughable knowing what happened in the playoffs. Kyle McCarr winning it would have been hilarious. There would have been riots.
Nice for Slaven for sure. Yeah,
there would have been absolute riots in the streets if Kyle McCarr. All right, let's wrap up the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, and let's start with your Eastern Conference Finals, which looked like they were going to be incredibly close the whole way through, and really were. Every single game was apart from the first one, every single game was a 1-goal game. Yeah. But the Panthers ended up.
That was the thing that really stood out to me. It was a much closer, and I don't know that necessarily means closer on the ice, but in terms of the score line, I really feel like the goalies did absolutely everything they could in this series to keep it as close as humanly possible.
What this series proves, and my brother, who Rangers fan, my brother this morning messages me and says that it's about that time. I'll read his exact quote, and he never bothers to catch up listening to the podcast, so he won't hear it. If you bother to listen to the podcast, Andrew, you'll hear this and you can yell at me. It's also now time where the talk around the Rangers goes from this team is special to what's wrong with this team. Wholesale changes need to happen in the off season, aka the time where I tune out for a bit. Now,
I mean, look, this. There was a lot of people talking about this being a team of destiny. So much. Of similarities to the '94 team and the anniversary of all of that and everything, and then the wind kind of went as soon as it looked like they weren't winning Game 6, as soon as they went Florida went 2 up and the Rangers just weren't really kind of responding in a significant way. The wind just went out of that fan base completely.
So, yeah, I don't want to repeat myself from last year. But, and I know he scored in the last game. But come on. I mean, the thing that I took out of this, a couple of things I took out of this series. First of all, for the money that Artemi Panarin is on, what the hell is he doing?
Honestly, I mean, overall, he's had a pretty great season comparatively. Compared to the last time you complained about him, he's been great.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a low bar because the last time he did absolutely bugger nothing. He scored one game.
I mean, look, this has been a great season for him.
Scored one goal, which was a series winner, but scored that one goal out of absolutely nowhere, having done absolutely nothing for the rest of the damn series. And yeah, it was just. I struggle with that. I don't think, and I'm going to talk about this in a little more depth shortly when I get to my bigger point that I'm going to have on another team. But what we learned about the New York Rangers this offseason is something that we've already known, which is that Igor Shesterkin is the best goalie in the NHL and is the best goalie in the world. And Igor Shesterkin, and if you watch some of the saves he made, especially in Game 6, he was single-handedly keeping it was like watching that cup run they went on where Henrik Lundqvist, like that game where when the Kings score in overtime to win the cup, and Lundqvist is flat on the ice because he made something
Given
like
absolutely everything he possibly can.
Yeah, in that game, he made almost 50 saves, and he had just done everything, and the Rangers gave him no help. And I just kind of felt like Shesterkin needed the Rangers to give him some more help in terms of time.
I mean, obviously, this should be a familiar sight for Rangers fans. I mean, this is as Rangers as it comes. Like of the last 20 or so years, like this is, the real kind of quintessential Rangers pissing away the best goalie in the league for a significant amount of time. Like they did it for Lundqvist's entire career.
Yeah, it's just, and we'll talk about Florida in a minute because obviously we're going to talk about them in the Cup preview. So we are going to give Florida their flowers. Florida, though, just quickly on that, Florida are fairly complete, and like they played really well.
Oh yeah, I mean, like take nothing away from like obviously they pushed Florida to the limits. They were at one point in time, it was looking like it could be a coin flip of a series, and it really could have gone either way. But I mean, how Rangers is it to have incredible goalie, just good team? Like that's
and it's
the entire time that I've watched the Penguins versus the Rangers. Like it's kind of just been that. It's been like if you can find a way to beat their goalie, the team's not really going to give you any trouble.
The problem for the Rangers is just lack of consistency up and down that roster. They've got some absolutely overwhelmingly brilliantly talented players, and they cannot consistently put anything together. They play really well in patches, and they'll have periods where you're like, okay, that's one of the best teams in the league. And then that team goes missing for 4 periods, 5 periods, 6 periods across the series. And you're like, oh, where did they go? And then they'll reemerge briefly. And it's like, it's the most Panarin thing on the planet to score the goal in a 2-1 loss, but like so late in that game that it was really going to be pushing it uphill to get a second.
Yeah.
And it's just, it was a reconfirmation for a lot of people, I think, that Igor Shesterkin is the Rangers. And I do think, as much as my brother's not going to want to hear massive overhauls, because like we won the President's Trophy, I think that team does need some more depth. They definitely need more. Like I think that like the Rempe stuff's been funny, but it's not funny anymore. They need to have some depth on that roster, and they need some players who can continuously put the puck in the net. Like as we said, Panarin's not that player. Panarin's a setup merchant. He's
I think they need some kind of X factor. Like whether that's some kind of top scoring forward, or whether that's depth, whether that's something like it's just been a good team with a great goalie for such a long time. They just need something to push them over the line in terms of, and it felt like it was going to be that year where they added all of those guys at the, was this the year before last, maybe, where they added all those guys at the deadline. It seemed like finally, they pushed themselves over that line from being just a good team to being a great team. And it still wasn't quite enough. They finally had some kind of depth because they'd added Kane and this and that, and all these kind of stuff,
I still think, I mean, look, everyone knows my views on Panarin, but I actually still think the biggest thing they've got, one of the biggest issues they've got there, they're not going to move off because, they might move off him because they have a history of sending their captains to the Tampa Bay line. So Trouba could find himself in Tampa, but Trouba is a liability and a half back there. Sorry. Mark Messier's favorite player in the league, Jacob Trouba, is
Chris, there's no greater leader with their elbow than Jacob Trouba.
The greatest leader in the NHL. Ask Mark Messier, he'll tell you. Jacob Trouba.
Some people lead with heart. He leads with elbow.
I just feel like it's not even about playing a bit rough or dirty. It's the liability of you're going to lose game time with him. You're going to rile the other team up, and it's not going to work in your favor. And also, while he's busy doing that, he's not defensively sound. Like Adam Fox could really do with another good defenseman back there.
Yeah.
Like, he looks
Yeah,
around.
the only time
Conrad
I'm
Miller's
concerned
okay.
about Tripper being on the ice is that he's gonna fucking concuss Sidney Crosby. Like that's what I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about him doing anything useful. I'm concerned about the fact that
He could knock
every
you out.
playoff he takes out a star. He literally like injures a star for several periods of time, and it's like. And he tried this playoffs. He got fucking close.
I mean, the Rangers have had like the other thing the Rangers have got to be very wary of this offseason is Timmy Panarin's 32, Zibanejad's 31, Kreider's 33, Trocheck is 30, Barclay Goodrow is 31, like Jacob Trouba is 30.
Yeah.
You've got an Igor is a sneaky 28. Now, goalies obviously play a lot longer, so you're fine. But
not all of them, but I mean, he will, but not all of them.
I mean, look, his backup will probably play another year, but Jonathan Quick is 38. But, like, time is really running out. Like, really, really running out.
The question is, too, is like, how long can Shesterkin be the best goalie in the NHL? That's really more the question for me is how long their competitive window is. It's not that, like, I think that Shesterkin will probably be good at 32, but will he be this level?
He's also got 1 year of contract left.
Yeah, like goalies don't pay well necessarily. There are so few goalies that are as good as the fact that Bobrovsky is doing this at this point in his career is insane.
To give you an idea of just for people who might not be aware of it, I'm going to run through Shesterkin's save percentages. And I'm going to go from – where do we go from? I'll go from St. Petersburg in 2016, 2017 because he played around a little bit in other places. So I'll go from 2016, 2017 in St. Petersburg. 2016, 2017 in St. Petersburg, he was a 937. In the playoffs for that year, by the way, he was a 940. The next year in St. Petersburg, he was a 933. The year after that, he was a 953. The year after that, he came to the Rangers. He was a 932. Then he's a 916, a 935, a 916, a 913. Right, a little bit lower, but in seasons where they've been more successful, and he makes big saves in the playoffs. By the way, Shesterkin has been the last couple of years has been a 929, a 931, and a 927 this year. Right, he is the best goalie in the world. I know someone's going to go, but Bobrovsky, no, it's Igor. Yeah. But yeah, I think you've got another couple of years. I think the big question for the Rangers coming up this year, obviously, they've got some decisions to make in terms of do they try to rotate the roster now while they can get value for some of those players before they lose all contract value, or do they just run with what they've got until it falls off? The question coming up, though, is Igor's age 29 season is next year, and then he's a UFA. How long do you
that's going to be a big contract.
And if you're Igor Shesterkin, what's the ask?
Yeah.
Because
it can't be less than what Bob's getting. Yeah.
He's looking at Bobrovsky. He's going.
What's Vasilevsky on? 11 and a half or something like that?
Yeah. So the Vasilevsky one.
Yeah, Vasilevsky. No, it's only 9.5. That's not so bad.
9.5.
I mean, I think they'd be happy if they got him at 9.5. I don't think it's going to happen, but.
And
it's been a few years since then. The equivalent of 9.5 now is probably 10.5, 11.
And also remember that he's playing in New York, so taxes are very different to the two Florida teams who are paying those goalies that much money. Yeah. So for him, in terms of real money, he wants to be making something close to those goalies. The Rangers have got a very big decision coming up on – now the answer is you sign Shesterkin. But what does that do to the rest of your roster? And do you get ahead of that by trying to make the roster moves now to cut some of the cap, rejuvenate the roster, and give Igor the money and hope that you can turn it around really fast? My other question is, do they have the right general manager to do that? I have a question mark on Drury. And do they have an owner prepared to do that? Because James Dolan, as we know, could go absolutely loco tomorrow and get rid of everybody. So you don't quite know what's coming with the Rangers. So, yeah, and we're about to talk about Florida in more depth. So Florida fans, it's coming. Let's get into the West. So Edmonton and Dallas goes to 6. Edmonton win today 2-1. Edmonton wins the series 4-2 and is giving Sportsnet everything it could ever have dreamed of in getting a Canadian team into a Stanley Cup final. Somebody was saying in the group today that it's about time that Canada had a team in the Stanley Cup. It's been far too, they haven't had a team in there for years. And I'm like, Habs fans right now crying, going, does this mean nothing to you? And the answer is yes, that means nothing to us.
Yeah.
But look, we'll hit this from a Dallas perspective because Edmonton, again, we'll talk about Edmonton a bit more in the preview. Dallas got 2-0 up in game 4.
Yeah, I mean,
just the bed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it, really. Like it felt like they were kind of starting to get control of the series. Like they could have been up, 3-1 after that, and that probably would have been it. They probably would have been over at that point in time, and then just Edmonton just ran over them, and they just kind of after that they just never really came back.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting series because at that point it legitimately looked like Dallas were going to run away.
Yeah,
like they were 2-0 up, and it was big time.
Like, yeah, they're in the pilot seat now. They're gonna do it.
I was talking to Oilers fans who were absolutely terrified at that point, like genuinely terrified. Not, oh well, it'll be fine. No, they were scared at that point especially because Darnell Nurse has had they've won their series with Darnell Nurse playing really badly. Like incredibly badly. And the first goal he let them in, and the second goal it literally went in off him.
It's impressive, honestly, how well Edmonton have kept the puck out of their net, considering
he's trying to throw it in.
Yeah, who they are, and the kind of it's just been a real kind of insane run of penalty kill and save percentage.
I mean, not many of us foresaw a series where the battle was between Darnell Nurse and Suter in terms of who was worse. And that was where the battle would be won or lost, because then, when Dallas started collapsing, Suter was culpable consistently at the back. Yeah. And there is going to be a lot of kudos to what Edmonton managed to do after the 2-0 goal. But a lot of it too seems to be, and I'm speaking this one now from experience, De Boer hockey. She'll get you. Now, I was wondering if we were going to get an extra year out of De Boer hockey before it does what it does, which is gets you right to where you want to be, but not quite exactly where you want to be. And that's what this is. It will get you right to the precipice of greatness. But there's a limit. And I think Dallas bumped into the limit of De Boer hockey because they moved completely away from it. They were very reliant on Joe Pavelski in particular, and that idea of Pavelski giving screens and tipping and making Skinner's life a living hell. And Pavelski was absolutely abysmal in this series. Absolutely abysmal. And there are a lot of people today posting out, the fact that this team let Joe Pavelski down, and they're going, Joe Pavelski was terrible. The team didn't let a valiant Joe Pavelski down. Pavelski was horrible in this series. And I always and I said in the preview, Pavelski needed to be big in this series because he's the net front menace that can take Stuart Skinner's eyes away, can give him the yips, and can put him in a position where he doesn't know where the puck is. And instead,
we definitely haven't seen the dominant kind of performance we're expecting from that, Hintz, Pavelski, Robinson line. That's I think that's kind of the X factor that they were missing. I know that Hintz was, injured and probably played through a lot getting to this point. And Robinson was kind of quiet at times. He was trying his best, but I mean, he can't carry that entire line on his own. There was a combination in that line that made it so special. And if 2 of the 3 of those guys are not able to kind of play up to that, that potential, then that's going to take a big hit. As much as Wyatt Johnston was a revelation, that he can't really kind of do that all on his own. And you get all the rest of just kind of Dallas being deep, but not really kind of having enough punch to get through. It's surprising. You wouldn't have thought that Edmonton would have been that difficult to score on, but Dallas's power play went cold. The Edmonton penalty kill went 24-0. That's you just cannot win a series that way. You absolutely just cannot win a series that way.
Their penalty kill's been superb. One of the things I will say is there were a lot of people absolutely panicking, a lot of Oilers fans panicking about the idea that they basically collapsed on themselves and tried to play penalty kill defense for the entire third period today, and nearly cost themselves big time. They turtled very early, and it will be, and again, we'll do it more in the preview. It will be interesting to see what happens when Florida can roll 4 lines consistently at Edmonton. Trying to make sure that you get breaks is going to be really important, and I don't know how that's going to look. I think there were Ottinger was decent in the series, across the board. He was fairly decent. He had a decent save percentage. I think it was a 9.17 for the playoffs, something along those lines, somewhere 9.14, 9.17, something around that mark. But made a couple of not particularly great attempted saves too. There were a couple where just didn't glove cleanly and left rebounds, and you can't leave rebounds for the Oilers. If there are a few teams you will get away with a rebound on. The Oilers aren't one of them, because they'll have probably either 29 or 97 standing on the doorstep. And if you leave them a puck, they'll put it in. And
look, props to just the dominant performance from Connor McDavid, in the first period. Just the fact that we talk about this game 6, this is not a game on paper that the Edmonton Oilers should have won. They had 3 shots in the first period. They scored on 2 of them. One of them was McDavid dangling through Miro Heiskanen. And backhanding it, point blank over Ottinger, and the other one was a power play shortly after that, where they at that point in time had 3 shots. They were up 2-0, and the game was basically over with 40 minutes left to play. The final shots were 10 for Edmonton and 35 for the Dallas Stars, and it was basically done in the first period.
Make absolutely no mistake about it. This game ended because 97 decided the series was over.
Yeah,
and
that's the real X factor that we talked about with the Oilers. It's that how far can Connor McDavid will them to succeed, and it was really just a matter of time. I know I've been kind of saying it for a couple of years that at some point in time, he's going to put the team on his back and get to the Cup final, and this year is basically what happened.
Now, first of all, Oilers fans, you're welcome, because the San Jose Sharks are the reason you are in the Stanley Cup final. Because if we didn't embarrass you that early in the season, you wouldn't have sacked Jay Woodcroft at that point, and you would have given yourself far too much to do. So you're welcome. Secondly, Brendan gets to sit back for this little bit, because Brendan, unlike me, doesn't make bold proclamations. I however do. However, I made a point earlier today after the game, and a couple of Oilers fans pushed back, and I'm going to go for it now. I said exactly what I said, and I mean it. I still do not believe that the Edmonton Oilers are elite. Now, what no one has asked in having a go at me about that statement is, well, who is elite? What does elite look like to you? Because the answer is nobody in this league is elite. We do not have elite teams at this point in time. What we have is some very good teams with some very, 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 very big strengths and glaring weaknesses. And everybody of those top contenders has massive, overwhelming strengths and huge, glaring weaknesses to them. And when I say elite, we're not looking at, when people start talking up teams as being elite, I've heard people start to describe that this Oilers defense is changed, and this Oilers defense is so much more. No, Evan Bouchard is good. That's what you mean. If you're saying this Oilers defense is amazing, what you're saying is Evan Bouchard is playing out of his damn skin this season, and he is. He has been absolutely fantastic. The Oilers are built around 2 generational players. Generational, not one, 2 generational players. The aim is keep the other team close so that you can unleash the destroyers of worlds. And they will then go and destroy the other team because they can. You saw that McDavid goal today. You talked about just going through Heiskanen. He went through the whole team. He made every one of the stars look like an absolute moron. He went through all of them himself, right? Not many players in the league can do that. They've got 2 players who are generational. They've now got a defenseman who knows what he's doing, which they haven't had in the past. They've also the biggest ability of Zach Hyman, everyone's talking about his point production. The biggest ability of Zach Hyman is drawing penalties. And Zach Hyman draws penalties very well, which allows the penalty kill to go, the power play to go to work. They are an elite power play. They are two generational players who will kill you if you're within a goal of them. And Evan Bouchard. There are going to be people who are going to say, look at Skinner in the last 4 games. He's elite. No, he's not. He's on a good run. You know, goalies get hot in the playoffs. Go 6 games back, and Skinner is probably the coldest goalie you've seen in the playoffs, right? So it literally can just be also quality of shooting chances, high danger chances. What do the shots look like? 35 shots, but how many of those shots were face up with a defenseman in front of him? How many of those shots were from near angles? How many of those shots were high danger chances? How many of those shots were produced massive saves? He made a couple of really good ones, and he's played a lot better. They are not elite, but you don't need to be elite to win the cup. And this is where people have been getting me wrong. At no point have I said the Oilers cannot win the Stanley Cup like this. I've said there are other teams who I think are better positioned to do it. But at no point have I said they can't. What I'm saying is they're not this elite juggernaut that a lot of people are trying to sell them as. They've got 2 players who can destroy everybody in the league. But every year so far, the roster construction brings them down. I don't think the roster is well built. It's not. You cannot say that Ken Holland has done a good job, right? If they win a Stanley Cup, Ken Holland will take all of the credit.
For a team that he inherited, basically, for a core that he inherited.
And I think that Oilers fans realistically, they won't say it out loud, but I think Oilers fans realistically will look at it and go, Ken Holland doesn't deserve any credit for this damn team winning. Like, because he hasn't done anything. He genuinely hasn't done anything. Like, how many times has he filled this roster with duds? Right? What we've got to, though, is a situation where they've been able to get through. They had a slightly softer run, but that's not me not denigrating them. You beat who's in front of you. They did. They then got to what was probably the best team in the West, and they beat them. So well done. They did exactly what they've had to do to get where they need to be. They are within 4 wins of a Stanley Cup. And if they win the Cup, it is 100% deserved. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm also not going to sit here and say that that's how you build a roster. And I'm not going to say that this is the elite team that we've been waiting for. What I'm going to say is that the Rangers won the President's Trophy. We said they're not elite. They've got the best goalie in the league, and they've got Adam Fox in defense, but they've got a hit-and-miss roster. You've got the Avs, who are a great team, but lack a bit of depth, and their goaltending is suspect as all hell. You've got the Golden Knights, who look stacked but don't score. They've got an amazingly suffocating defensive presence. But if you get them in a shootout, you're going to beat them because the Golden Knights can't outscore you consistently. And, you know, Dallas was relying on veterans leading the way, and the veterans kind of looked a bit old and tired. If you are a general manager going forward, every year, the general managers going forward look at the team that wins the cup and go, what can we borrow? How do we do this? Now, unless you are going to draft McDavid and Draisaitl back-to-back, that's not happening. But what I would actually like to see, and this is the last part of this, and then Brendan can go for it and everyone can go crazy. What I actually want general managers to take from this is ignore the idea of trying to build an elite team. Build a team to your strengths. Build a team that matches what you've got. And don't try to all play the same style of hockey. As someone who has their favorite team was stuck in the Pacific, which was nothing but big, bruising, boring hockey, it sucked to watch. I want everyone in the league to actually play a style that suits the players they've got in front of them, because that's what Edmonton has actually done well since the coaching change. Knobloch's come in and gone, we're not a defensive team.
Yeah.
Why would we try?
Yeah.
Let's go and get some penalties. Let's use the power play, and let's try to come up with ways to keep it. We're not going to try to be overly defensive, but we're going to make the shots harder.
Yeah,
Like
we're gonna get shot on a lot. Let's try
yeah.
and make them, less dangerous. But
And also,
we'll play rope-a-dope.
yeah, and if we can rope a dope and not do it in a way that's so dangerous, we can rest Connor and we can rest Leon a little bit more, and then we can unleash them. And that's what they've done that's a lot better. They made Dallas try to play, and Marty got stuck into me. It was like, they don't just play run and shoot. But largely that's what the Oilers are. They're run and gun, right? And they are. They're speed down the ice, they're quick moving pucks, and then bang, 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 right? They lured Dallas out of the ball hockey and tried to make it a track meet. And the second Dallas tried to make it a track meet, they were dead. Because you can't out track meet the Oilers. So don't try. Right? They got that second goal and decided they're going to get flat, and that was what ruined them. So what I want general managers to take from the Oilers, if they do happen to go and win the cup, is do your own damn thing. Don't try to play the same as everyone else. Don't copy the style. What have I got on my roster? How can I play a style of hockey with this group of players that's going to win? I think the Rangers would benefit from that because they've got a lot of, they want to play big bruising hockey, and yet look at some of the players on that team. They're not.
Yeah.
Why have they struggled with Lafreniere? Because he's not that. That's not his game. But you've got him, so you've got to use him like that. I don't think that's Panarin's game. I don't think that's his strength. So what I get when I say the Oilers aren't elite, I'm not saying they can't win a cup. On the contrary, they definitely can win a cup like that. What I'm saying is I don't think we actually have elite teams in the NHL anymore. I think parity means we've got massive weaknesses and massive strengths. And the thing the Oilers have done well this year is play to the massive strength and just go, I don't care about the weakness. We're just going to play strength.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's true. I agree with a lot of that. I think the reality is that, with the nature of the salary cap and the nature of, how teams are constructed, the fact that we have 32 teams, all this kind of stuff, it's there's no, huge dynasty teams anymore. There's no, teams that are going to go, win 6 Stanley Cups in a row. It's just not possible anymore with the way that teams are constructed. It's hard enough to keep a team together, 2-3 years in a row, let alone, that kind of period of time. It's, there's all these teams are going to have weaknesses. They're going to have something that, that they're going to need to try and, avoid. And you look back at the teams that, that won even during that, the when the Penguins won back-to-back, they weren't a perfect team. They had some big weaknesses. They, specifically, they got outshot a bunch of games. They got outplayed a bunch of games, and they still, they found ways to win by, leaning on their strengths. And I think that's the reality of, what Edmonton is doing. And that's, and that's hard because that's not necessarily a useful, thing that a general manager can take and go oh, well, we're just going to, we're going to suck a little bit and we're going to try and win anyway, because we've got generational talent.
To use that Penguins team as an example, that Stanley Cup final with the Sharks, the Sharks felt good going into that final until Logan Couture, who was shooting at a really high rate at that point in time, went down. And the second Couture went down and we didn't have a goal threat, parity was there. And the second you've got the Sharks with a sort of taken a slight step back from where they were, a team with Crosby and Malkin's going to eat that up. And so you end up in and Kessel, because Kessel was amazing in that playoff.
Yeah.
But when the Sharks had Couture, who had been scoring at an amazing pace through those playoffs, Logan Couture goes down. Suddenly it comes back to the talent factor. Once it gets back to that talent factor, the Penguins had Malkin and Crosby and, Letang and just were better. And didn't matter what San Jose did at that point in time, the Penguins were always going to get over the line there because the Sharks' offensive talent had gone. And so you're not going to win a game of skill against two of the most skilled players in the league at the time. And it's the same here with Edmonton. Once Dallas stopped doing the things that make Dallas special, it becomes a battle of talent on the ice. And if you've got McDavid and Draisaitl, you are automatically ahead in that. And that's the situation. And Dallas went away from what they were doing that was working and never went back to it. And that's the more confusing part and why I would actually be a little bit worried. Now, Dallas, we'll talk a bit more about Edmonton in a minute, but Dallas obviously Pavelski sounding like this is probably it for Joe Pavelski. Dallas is going to find themselves next year in a really tricky spot because we are hitting the season of DeBoer hockey where you normally fire him. It's normally around this time that the message stops resonating. Like and remember, the Sharks made the Stanley Cup final, then nearly made it all the way through again. Yeah, and then at the end of that run, the next season, DeBoer hockey was terrible and we sucked and we got rid of him. Right? So the drop with DeBoer when it happens, and ask Devils fans before us, they'll tell you, that drop is rapid. So Dallas, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to happen, but Dallas has got some big choices to make in the offseason in terms of their recruitment, because if they get that wrong, that room might not be listening to DeBoer by like 6 weeks into the season. So
well, let's bring it into the cup final, series. Then, obviously we know the game plan for the Oilers to win. How do you feel about the matchup with Florida? Because I think in a lot of ways I would say that there's kind of similar teams in terms of their depth between like Florida and Dallas. I think that the deepest team in the East and deepest team in the West kind of it's a similar kind of matchup in that regard. Can they do it again? Can they find a way to steal that McDavid carry the team to victory?
I feel like, and like there was a bit of banter back and forward about the Florida will just roll over the top of the Oilers. And one thing, even me not believing in the Oilers as strongly as a lot of people do, the one thing I will definitely say to everybody is that's not happening. The Oilers, I think, have shown that they have an ability to keep it close, even if they're not the favorite. And look, they haven't really played brilliantly across the playoffs. They were run far too close by the Kings initially. They really got taken into deep water by Vancouver, not at its full strength, and battled with Dallas the whole way too. Although that was expected, but actually, probably Dallas was the more impressive of their 3 series wins, which is really funny, given the fact that the first 2 series you expected them. Like we talked about that, and like I expected them to run over the top of the Canucks and only just get there in the end. Really, I think Edmonton will keep the series very close, definitely. I think Florida are probably one of the only teams that can keep up with Edmonton's scoring. I think that Florida have more complete depth than the Oilers do. I still don't trust, if you've got to play those bottom lines for the Oilers, I still don't trust that that's going to go well. What I do like that Knobloch's done is a little bit more playing Draisaitl at second center rather than necessarily just loading the top line. Like in game 5, I think it was, he loaded up and he had McDavid 1C, Draisaitl 2C, and played McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins to give them some more depth. And that's one of the things I've talked about a lot, that I think the Oilers are actually a stronger team when you have those 3 centers and can roll those 3 lines. It works a lot better for me personally. I just think that Florida's defensive depth is a lot stronger than Edmonton's. I don't think we're going to see as many penalties because it's the Stanley Cup final. And therefore, if power play is taken out of the equation a lot more, that opens it up a lot more as well. And I think
that's obviously a big factor, because obviously Edmonton's power play is such a weapon for them.
And I also think that Bobrovsky has been insane in these playoffs. And yes, Skinner's had a couple of good games, but the lows of Stuart Skinner, remember, this is a man who at one point was pulled and was not getting the net back. Like they said straight up, he wasn't getting the net back. And then through necessity, got the net back. So I still think that Skinner's not... I think there'll be a point where Stuart Skinner turns back into a pumpkin. And I'm going Florida. So congratulations, Edmonton. There's your cup. I'm going Florida. I think that they've just got more, but they need to take the game. Yeah, they take their chances. Dallas, what I will say with Dallas is that Dallas proved that if you don't take your chances when they're offered, McDavid and Draisaitl will kill you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that Florida need to take their chances. And if Florida can take their chances, they should win.
Yeah.
If Edmonton can keep that close, you don't know what 97 will do.
Yeah, absolutely. My gut instinct is Florida in 6, but I mean, we could absolutely see McDavid put this team on his back, and that's the factor of McDavid. It's hard to bet against it.
And look, I will say, because there has been a bit of, you just hate the Oilers. No, I don't hate the Oilers. I genuinely don't hate the Oilers. I will, however, tell everyone straight up, because I've declared this many times on the podcast, and I will be very open and honest about this. I do not want the Oilers to win the cup, partly because I do not want to see. I don't want to see Ken Holland rewarded for doing nothing. Like, I don't want Ken Holland to be fated as a genius for doing absolutely nothing correct and winning a cup because he's just got the best player in the world. The other part about this is more personal. I do not want a world where Evander Kane is celebrated as a Stanley Cup champion to exist. I do not want that world to exist. That is personal. You can have a completely different opinion to me, and that is your opinion to have. Personally, I think the man is the scum of the earth, and I don't want him to have a Stanley Cup. But having said that, if the Oilers do win the cup, it's fully deserved. They've done exactly what they've needed to do across these playoffs. They have answered a bunch of questions. McDavid and Draisaitl have been very good, and they don't look like they're out of energy. And normally, as they get to the latter part of the playoffs, they look tired. They don't look tired. So I think that if Knobloch can come up with a strategy to knock Florida off their game, they're in the shot. I just think that Florida have learned the lessons of last year. I just don't think we're going to see that. I think Florida in 6. But if it goes Edmonton, I'm not going to be surprised by that either. Like, it won't shock me. Whoever wins this cup is not going to shock me.
No. I mean, look, I think I'm, there's positives to look at either way. I would like to see, McDavid, put a Stanley Cup as part of his resume, so that there's never any, kind of dumb question that a lot of elite players get about, oh, well, he never won a cup. Like, he did absolutely everything he could to get there. It would be nice to, tick that off in the way that, like, Ovechkin did, where, that got just, taken off the question marks about him when he eventually
I'm not looking forward to the off-season narrative about Austin Matthews but McDavid won a cup with the worst team, because that's the next step, and I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah. But at the same time, I really like a lot of guys in Florida. So look, I'm happy with whatever happens with this one. It's going to be a fun series to watch.
It'll be a fun series to watch. Look, again, I do want Florida because I just Evander Kane, but again, I'm not in no way, shape, or form will I think that Edmonton winning the cup is undeserved. They've done exactly what they've needed to do. I think they did have what, if you looked at it from the start, was an easier side of the draw, but it wasn't easier. But they went long on both of those series, and they got pushed hard. And so, like, they've fought through things, and they've come out the other side. And again, they fought through things and then had to play a harder opponent and managed to beat the harder opponent. So they will be fully confident. I think that Paul Maurice, Chris Knobloch was exactly what we thought we'd get.
Of course.
And that's going to be an interesting little match there too. But yeah, look, it'll be a fascinating Stanley Cup series, but that's going to do us for now. So we will be back once we have a winner.
Yeah.
We will be back.
Shouldn't be too long, although unfortunately the series doesn't start until like Sunday. We've got almost a week off.
So the really stupid part about the Stanley Cup is that if this goes to Game 7, a lot of the people within the organization will not be able to celebrate because the draft is like 2 days after.
Yeah.
So literally the cup will be handed out, and the entirety of the development staff and the general manager and all of that will be 5 seconds of, yay, we got the cup, and then literally into war room mode because they've got the draft. So the NHL needs to do better. Like, they need to do better. This doesn't need to be going this long. They could have started everything earlier. They could have moved things around, probably due to arenas. But, like, again, you can't have a situation where the draft is like a day and a half, like 2 days after the Stanley Cup's ended.
Yeah.
Stupid. Like there should be at least at least a week between. So
for sure.
you know, it's a good thing that Vegas aren't there, because if Vegas were there, like everyone would be drunk and they'd be
yeah.
All right, well that's going to do us. We'll be back to talk about who wins the cup, and we'll catch you all later.
So yeah.